Welcome back to Hardball. Don Rumsfeld was in the hot seat on Capitol Hill today over the death of Army Ranger Pat Tillman. And at the heart of the questioning was whether the former Defense Secretary tried to cover up the circumstances surrounding Corporal Tillman's death. Take a look.
I have not been involved in any cover-up whatsoever, and I don't believe there's an individual at this table who I know well and observed at close quarters in very difficult situations who had any role in a cover-up.
Is Rumsfeld telling the truth, or was he involved in the Pentagon cover-up of Tillman's death? Two war veterans join us tonight. John Soltz served in Iraq in 2003 and is co-founder and chairman of VoteVets.org. And Eric Eglin served in both Iraq and Afghanistan and is a member of Vets for Freedom. Gentlemen, I don't know whether you heard Colonel Jack Jacobs on the segment just before this, but it's his opinion that there was no real cover-up at the top, that this was more of a tactical screw-up on the ground that resulted in Corporal Tillman getting killed by friendly fire. What's your view? Conspiracy at the top or just a tactical screw-up on the ground? Eric?
Mike, I agree with that. I mean, it's more than just a screw-up on the ground. There was clearly some malfeasance in terms of sharing incorrect information. I have a close friend who was a ranger in Afghanistan at the time, and I remember him telling me, hey, this is ugly in terms of the information that was shared from the guys on the front. But once that information went forward, you can't blame the Defense Department for sharing that because they thought it was truthful. So that's why it's appropriate to fry some of those guys that were out forward. But trying to pin it on Secretary Rumsfeld doesn't make any sense.
John, what's your view?
I think the whole thing is absolutely disgusting. You know, we know as young officers in the Army, if one of our soldiers is killed, that we owe the family an answer. And if this administration can't come clean and tell Mary Tillman and the Tillman family what happened to their son, they've hurt the morale of our troops, it hurts our recruiting, destroys the integrity of our institution. When a 3-star or 4-star general shows up at a funeral, General Kensinger, and he gives the Silver Star to the family, and he knows that the soldier was killed by friendly fire, it's misleading not only to us but to our entire country. When the new report comes out that the coroner felt that he was killed from within 10 meters, it's a big problem. And I encourage everyone to go to VoteVets.org, sign our petition, over 5,000 people. Tell the president, you don't need to invoke executive privilege here. You need to be the commander-in-chief. You need to help the military out here. You need to tell the family and our troops what happened to Pat Tillman.
Eric, you know, I mean, the Silver Star citation, I mean, a bullet is a bullet, and Corporal Tillman clearly was acting honorably and courageously, and yet the idea that this information was relayed back to Washington within a few days, perhaps, weeks, certainly, and that we're still talking about this, and that there are still questions lingering out there about this. This does not smack well for the Pentagon, for former Secretary Rumsfeld, for anybody involved in this.
Well, certainly. I mean, it happened terribly, but that's the thing. Once the information comes from the field, the people in the Pentagon, you know, did what they would do based on assuming that information was truthful. It turns out it was not. So, I mean, and I think they did the right thing. Once it came out, you know, several weeks later, hey, this was friendly fire. This was not what it claimed to be. They did what they should do, which is launch an investigation. And now these generals are being hung out to pay the price, which they should be. But we can't just do a political knee-jerk reaction and say blame Rumsfeld every time something goes wrong within the entire multi-million-person Department of Defense.
It's totally not acceptable. Secretary Rumsfeld is the Secretary of Defense. The President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief. If the investigation was done properly the first time, we would never have thought Pat Tillman was killed by enemy fire. If the investigation was done well the second time, we wouldn't have thought Pat Tillman was killed from 150 meters away. And now we're finding out this week that Pat Tillman was killed, according to the coroner who looked at the body, from 10 meters away. So where are the facts here? The president needs to not invoke executive privilege and be honest with the American public. Let's put this in a larger context. April of 2004 was the Tet of Iraq. It's when the Shia militias rose up in Iraq and the Mahdi army, and we had to extend the 1st Armored Division from 12 months to 15 months. It's when George Bush retreated from Fallujah when the Marines got burned at the stake and wouldn't go back into Fallujah for 6 months because of his re-election bid. And it's at the height of the Abu Ghraib scandal. And the politicians and the president, they needed a hero, and they chose Pat Tillman. And it's unfortunate because they misled our country at a time where they tried to justify political support for this soldier. It's terribly unfortunate to use the death of an American soldier for your own partisan political gain. How do you expect a recruiter to walk into the homes of the mothers and fathers and ask for their son or daughter to fight and do what all Americans should do, which is serve our country, when the parent can look back at our recruiters and they can say, why should my son or daughter fight for a president who's going to use their death for political support?
Eric,
it's absolutely
that's hyper spinning of. I mean, you're using the report on this for
that's
your own
absolutely not. It's
gain.
absolutely.
So I mean, it's crazy to say that. I mean,
why are you putting the death? Why are you putting the death of the soldier? Why are you putting?
Wait,
why do you care more about politics than the death of an American soldier? That's sick. It's really sick.
John, you just made your statement, and I think you're spinning a report for your own political advantage. And I think that's wrong.
Does Mary Tillman know all the facts?
Goes wrong.
Does Mary Tillman know all the facts of the death of her son? Absolutely not. And
that's
what
we're investigating. That's why it's appropriate to do. Well, if you're going to ask me a question,
the White House
you need
has
to let me
invoked
answer.
executive privilege. It's absolutely sick.
John, you need to.
I would expect somebody
make
like you to care more. I would expect somebody like you to care more about a soldier who fought for this country than the President of the United States, who's a partisan politician.
All right,
it's absolutely sick.
All right, John. Now let Eric have his say. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, we need to come out of the hyper partisan spin zone and just look at the facts. There were wrong information was transmitted from the commanders on the ground. They're being held accountable. Once you have something that goes wrong like that, intentionally in this case, it takes a long time to figure it out because everyone starts covering their tracks and misleading in different areas. But to say that every time something goes wrong, and this was a terrible thing, so to say because I don't think we ought to fire the president and the SecDef every time something goes wrong
is apologize. I want him to apologize. I want him to be the commander-in-chief.
You're using this for political purposes.
That's unfortunate. There is a family out there that wants the truth about why their son was killed serving our country in war.
Absolutely, and there's a long investigation to bear that out, and that's why for people who are misleading, they need to be held accountable, and they are.
Well, Eric, let me ask you about this. Off of that last statement, it just sitting here watching the testimony today, it struck me as rather unusual that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, General Myers, who knew who Pat Tillman was, everyone was aware of who he was.
Sure.
There was a lot of stuff written about him joining, enlisting, becoming a Ranger, fighting in Afghanistan, and for him to treat the death and the knowledge that he died from friendly fire in such a cavalier manner as he did today in his testimony, I don't buy it. I don't think many people do buy it. How do you buy it?
Well, I think it comes down to the basic facts that the commanders out on the ground said things that were not true. And then once that filtered up the chain of command reacted. And then once they found out that it was not true, then they launched an investigation. And that's what's created this whole mess in the first place. But once they set up the investigation, you can't hold them responsible for the initial malfeasance on the part.
Why not? It's the chain of command.
Because they're taking responsible action. When you find out, I mean, I've been in command. I'm sure John has been responsible for people too. When you find out something has gone wrong in your scope of responsibility, it's your job to investigate it. So and then that doesn't mean you're automatically held responsible for every single thing that goes wrong.
Those 4 stars on General Myers' shoulder means he's in charge. He's responsible. He's accountable. It's up the chain of command. Both you guys know
your whole argument is basically saying so no one beneath him can ever do anything wrong that merits any sort of punishment.
My argument here is that we still don't have the facts. My argument here is really simple. We still don't have the facts in this case. The coroner report just came out and said, hey, this guy was shot from 10 meters away. The president is invoking executive privilege here as if this is the Alberto Gonzalez case. There is a dead American soldier. His family deserves the truth. We know it as officers. We write to mothers and wives and husbands and daughters, and we say, your son or daughter fought honorably, and this is how they died. I was in Iraq. We had similar scenarios with fratricide. Even when there was when I was personally aware of a situation where there was a cover-up, the battalion commander flew back to the States and told the family what happened. Why can't the commander-in-chief here stand up and be the commander-in-chief? He is leading. I mean, because he won't
you just
tell
said
the truth here,
the president should take the same responsibility as a battalion commander.
Absolutely.
You guys are
is the commander-in-chief.
the rank
he is invoking
structure.
executive privilege. He is,
Someone who's in
not
charge of
giving
millions of troops cannot do the
George
same
Bush is
role
not giving
as someone
information
who's
to
in charge of
Congress.
500.
Executive privilege.
John Saltz, Eric Eglin, I want to thank you both very much, and thank you both very much for your service to our country.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Up next.